Well, would you believe it? Once again, the headlines are a little bit confusing this morning. I read in the BBC, among other places, that there is a plan to ban zombie knives, which led to some confusion on Twitter because zombie knives, such as they are already banned. So let's take a closer look. Welcome back to the channel. So let's take a look at that BBC article and what it says about the plan to ban zombie knives, as well as machetes, by the way. And I'll tell you about the legislation that already bans zombie knives such as they are, which actually, it would be more accurate to describe this as a bit of a loophole. So let's turn to this news article first. This describes how there is a plan to ban menacing machetes and zombie knives. For which I agree with, for what it's worth, because I don't believe there's any real need for anybody to own such a thing, unless maybe you're a farmer or something, and then you've got your own tools for that in the first place. So machetes and so-called zombie knives with no practical use could be banned in England and Wales under proposals to shut down legal loopholes and curb violence. Now, certain knives, which are designed to look menacing, are not currently banned, would be made illegal under the plans, according to the Home Office. So the confusion has come about with what is or is not a zombie knife. Now, this is the key bit here, and I'll take you to the legislation in a moment, which says under the current rules, the possession of machetes and zombie knives are not outlawed unless they feature images or words on them that suggest that they could be used for violence. Now, I've always found this a little bit odd in the first place because the Criminal Justice Act of 88 was amended, and the Offensive Weapons Act 2019 provided that there is an offence to have in your possession in public or in private certain weapons that are banned. Now, if we move to the schedule, which lists those weapons, which is in the Criminal Justice Act 88, Offensive Weapons Order of 88, amended by the OWA, we get this list of banned weapons. Now, if I try to amend this very slightly so you can see more of it. Actually, you can see that perfectly fine anyway. So just looking at the first bit here. So these are the things, just for the avoidance of doubt, these things are banned to own in public, in private, and all of that sort of stuff. So if you are caught with one of these, it is a offence and it will be confiscated, seized. So these include knuckle dusters, which is a hard band of metal or other hard material worn on one or more fingers. Everyone should really know what a knuckle duster is. A sword stick, that is a hollow walking stick or a cane containing a blade which may be used as a sword. That's because it's concealed. Other weapons known as hand claws. Anyone that grew up in the 80s watching ninja films will know exactly what these hand claws are. Belt buckle knives, push daggers, hollow kubotans, foot claws, shurikens or throwing stars, and all sorts of other things. Now, the bit in question here is what's referred to as a zombie knife or a zombie something other kind of knife, which I won't say for YouTube purposes. But these are those that have a cutting edge, a serrated edge, and this is the key differentiator here, that word and images or words, whether on the blade or on the handle, that suggest that it's used for the purposes of violence. Now, you might quite rightly ask, well, what difference does that make? Well, the difference it makes is that if someone is carrying this thing that has words or images on it that show that it's to be used for the purposes of causing harm or other kind of violence, then clearly there is an intent behind the carrying of that thing. So that is why currently there is this conjunction here between these three elements, and this one, images and words, mean that this is currently a banned item. Now, the plans are going to close that loophole as it really is, and therefore make those banned as well. Now, as it says here, this means that if police find weapons in someone's home, currently they cannot seize them, even if they'll be used to commit a crime, because if they don't have words or images or whatever, then this is a technical loophole. But these plans are going to curtail that yet further. And for what it's worth, I agree, because why anyone would want such a knife is beyond me. For what it's worth, I often get criticized for this, but in the view of being completely impartial, neutral, telling you the law as it is, There is an exception under section 139 for carrying a folding pocket knife, something like this. Now, something like this is a 3-inch blade, which is immediately foldable at all times and is perfectly legal to carry, save for places like a school, a court, or other places that you really don't need a lawyer to tell you that you shouldn't be carrying one of these around. But obviously, you cannot carry it with the intent of using it to cause harm, even if that might be in self-defense, because if you're carrying it with the intent of causing harm, then it becomes an offensive weapon, which is an entirely separate matter than having a exemption to carrying a folding pocket knife. The purpose behind the exemption, which I tell to everybody that criticizes me for talking about it, the key behind the exemption is the law never intended to restrict you from carrying what would otherwise be a tool, which is why case law has told us that a screwdriver is not a bladed article for the purposes of the legislation, but it will be an offensive weapon if it's carried for the purposes and the intention of causing harm. Just like anything else, you could carry a selfie stick. I have a GoPro selfie stick here, which if you like the look of it, I'll link it in the description below. You can buy it. This is just a selfie stick, but it looks an awful lot like an extendable baton, and it could probably be used as an extendable baton. That's not to say you should. Obviously, you shouldn't, because if you used it as an extendable baton, that makes it an offensive weapon. As it is now, it's just a selfie stick to walk around and film yourself with. But practically anything can be an offensive weapon. So when it comes to zombie knives and machetes, whilst the technical word on it at the moment is that there are ways of owning them and having them in your possession without breaking the law, these plans quite rightly are going to seek to restrict that further. Because if somebody does want to carry a blade with them for a sensible purpose or within an exempt purpose, such as a folding pocket knife, then this is one such thing that you can do that with. Others ask me about going camping with a knife or going climbing with a knife, because I've done climbing in my time. Anyone that's done climbing will know that at some stage you might need to cut a rope for safety purposes. And so if you have a knife with you for that purpose, it's a good reason. If you use a knife for work, be it a Stanley knife or a DeWalt knife for work, and you're at work, then that's obviously a good reason to have it with you. If you're traveling home from work, that's a good reason to have it with you. If you've stopped by the pub on the way home and it's still in your pocket, that's probably going to fall foul of having a good reason to have it with you. And my suggestion in cases like that, if you've forgotten and you happen to have it with you when the police come by and do a random check on the place, my suggestion is be completely honest about it, because you're much less likely to say, get into trouble by saying, I'm terribly sorry, officer. I didn't realize I had this with me. I will take it straight back now. I've come from work. I've come for a quick pint or whatever it might be. My ultimate guidance is make sure you don't forget and you leave it in the van in a secure place if you are going somewhere on the way home. And ideally, you go straight home. But we all forget sometimes, and we all end up in this position that you need to explain yourself. In my view, if you need to explain yourself in these kind of situations, my view is that you be honest about it, you be open about it, and you just explain yourself. Because if you're confrontational with the officers, you are much more likely to get them antagonized, and they are much more likely to cause you trouble. So for what it's worth, I support this move as reported, but I come here to help to clarify the misunderstandings and the confusion around what is a zombie knife. And just as a slight tangent before we leave the video, some people have also asked me about swords, which you probably see in the background here in my video and other swords. These are traditionally made carbon fiber folded steel swords made in the traditional sense, which is another exemption for curved blades over, I think it's 50 or 54 centimeters. I'll have to double check. Or they're antique and they're made before a certain period of time. So you obviously have to check the law for those. Standard sort of basic steel swords that are not traditionally made and not antique or made before a certain time period, and they are just swords for any other kind of reason, they are most likely to be banned to own as well. So I have done other videos on that, going into that in more depth, so you can go and check those out. But in the meantime, I hope that's helped to clear up some of the confusion and some of the misleading headlines or mildly misleading. They must be misleading headlines because some people within the Twitter thread said, I'm confused. I thought these were already banned. Now, zombie knives, as they are defined in legislation, are already banned. The loophole is those that look very much like a zombie knife, but they lack the words or images, which is part of, remember, it is part of, let's just go back to it once more before we finish, part of the definition here. It has a cutting edge, a serrated edge, and images or words, whether on the blade or the handle, that suggest it's to be used for the purposes of violence. So it's a conjunctive, each of those three to be defined as a zombie knife or zombie something else knife. So those are banned for the avoidance of doubt. So I don't want anybody reading this headline to think, well, there's a plan to ban them, so they're not yet banned. So we're okay at the moment, because you're not okay if it fits that legal definition here. If you have one of these that fits this definition here, my suggestion is you either destroy it or you hand it into a police station with full knowledge. You can even say, if you're planning to do that and you're worried about doing that, about getting into trouble for having it, you can say, not that you can rely on this as legal advice, but you can say you've seen my video and I've suggested that you voluntarily hand it in and surrender it and say you didn't realize it wasn't legal. Now you do. You're taking it in. That's my suggestion to you. As I say, not legal advice. I can't accept responsibility for it, but it's better than nothing. It's better than keeping it because it would be illegal. And at the very least, you're being open, you're being honest. And I would certainly have things to say if the police were to take action against you for having it when you're trying to hand it in. Because the whole point of all of these amnesties and everything else are to hand these items in because they are dangerous and they cause harm. And the idea is to prevent that by removing these from the streets. So I hope you found that video useful. Please do remember to like this video, subscribe if you like this walkthrough analysis on headlines and what the truth of the matter is behind the legislation. And I'd be very grateful you smash that like button and subscribe. I am nearing on 300,000 subscribers on my goal for 1 million to help 1 million people understand law. So in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.